Welcome to the Bill Cartwright Show with Steve Cohen. Our special guest today is Karen Stack Umlauf. Am I pronouncing that right? I'm probably not.
Wait, give it a try. I didn't hear it.
No, you just told me because I'm going to screw it up. I really am.
Umlauf.
Umlauf. And I was pronouncing that this morning and I had it right, but it's really interesting. We've known each other for such a long time. And I'm still curious about, can you talk about where you grew up and talk about your parents?
Okay. I grew up in a south suburb of Chicago, South Holland. And my parents are from the Chicago area, born and raised, and near South Side. My dad went to St. Ignatius. My mom went to Mercy High School. And so then back in those days, to get a little more land, you moved out to South Holland where I was. And I went to a all-girls Catholic school out there, close to home, like for the first 3 years of high school. And then we ended up moving again to out west. So Oak Forest, Payless Park. But, my mom and dad, both big sports supporters. My dad played every sport, and then he played high school and college basketball. So he went on to play at Loyola of the South. One of the coaches from St. Ignatius ended up, I believe it was from the high school staff, got the head job at Loyola, New Orleans. So he brought a bunch of his Chicago area boys down there. So they got to see another part of the world and loved it. And, my dad, like all of us, he just wanted us to do whatever we liked. And he was a huge proponent of mine. And really the reason why I was able to play basketball at a time when it wasn't that available for girls growing up. I'm one of 5 kids, and all of us, were able to, we'd play in the driveway basically when they didn't have teams for the girls in grade school. But my brother was playing for like 3 different, my brother, who's like a grade older than me, was playing for all the, teams, and I never missed a game, and my dad helped coach that. So, and my mom, she also loves sports, never really got to play much. They just did it in gym class. So, but they were great. They were great for us growing up, and just they really like the ideals that you learn from being part of a team.
Can you talk about playing in high school and talking about who was your mentor? Was it your coach? Was it your dad? And how did you really learn how to play basketball?
From my dad. Yeah, the coach, unfortunately, for my first 3 years of high school, there was a different teacher almost every year that they just by default got the job. And we only had maybe 7 or 8 girls really coming out for the team. So I was relied upon a lot to help like with all the in-game stuff and even with our practices. And I would get input from my dad. And, it was just from watching it for 5 years in grade school, like 3 or 4 games a day I'd watch for my brother. And they just didn't have the teams. We had volleyball that was a short season, and then we were cheerleaders. There wasn't really a basketball team. This was back in the mid 70s. So anyway, I learned mostly everything from my dad, because he was a real technician with like how to shoot your free throws, how to rebound, and he believed using the backboard, when you're inside. So we know the game has changed a lot where the bigs now are definitely able to do every facet of the game. But back then you had more of a role of just, throw the ball to a guard or turn around, keep the ball high, shoot it. So.
Well, you had to have been pretty good because you ended up going to school at Northwestern. So how did that process work to where you got a lot of attention. You went to Northwestern. So what was that process like?
Yeah, so I went 3 years to the Catholic school, and then my senior year, I just was ready to get more serious about basketball. And there was a really good public school team near us. So my dad and I went and watch their playoff game. And something was like so strong inside of me that I wanted to be part of a team like that, we actually weren't able to sell our house yet. So I lived in an apartment, and my younger sister came too, was a freshman at the time, or turning into her sophomore year. And my older sister was in college at St. Xavier, which is local. So we got a little apartment during the week to be local in that, and have an address in Oak Forest and live there. And then that team went on to go downstate, and we had like really good players on the team. And I learned so much my senior year that actually Northwestern was where my brother was at the time. And by the time I went and made a visit, they had all of their players recruited already, because they were one of the better women's programs in the country at the time. And so I went to Loyola University my first year, and they were kind of startup at that point. So played there for a year, did really well. And then after my season there, I went and talked to the coach at Northwestern, who was new at the time, Annette Lynch, and she was friends with my high school coach. And they, so I made the move and played my last 3 years at Northwestern. So that's kind of my story.
Wow, I did not know that. Now
Yeah.
talk about the differences of playing at Loyola and playing at Northwestern.
I would say Loyola, I loved it. It was a smaller environment, like real family oriented. And, but at that time they were playing, that was their first year, I think, at Division I level. So the schedule was still really pretty weak. We were playing against a lot of like junior colleges and local, just the competition wasn't that good. So it was fun, we won, and we had like 5 incoming freshmen, and then there were maybe a couple upperclassmen that played, but it was like the freshmen got an opportunity right off the bat. And then whereas Northwestern, they had won the Big Ten championship a couple years before that under Coach Mary DeStanislaw, who then took the coaching job at Notre Dame. And so they were just, there was quite a difference between the two programs at that time. So it was a good starting point for me to be at Loyola, because I probably wouldn't have had the confidence I got, being able to think I could compete at Northwestern if I wasn't able to play a lot and have a lot of success at Loyola.
Can you talk about because I don't know, who's Northwestern's rival, or who was their rival then?
We had a big rivalry, honestly, with Wisconsin at that time. It was always a big game, but Ohio State was with Tara Vanderveer. It was obviously, everyone knows about in women's basketball now with Stanford. She was at Ohio State at that time, and they were winning everything. So they were everyone's rival, but, and obviously Illinois, we're in the same, same state. And so all the rivalries had a little bit of meaning, but probably more so I remember at the time, Wisconsin, Illinois, and then Ohio State.
Talk a little bit about your teammates at school.
It's funny. I still keep in touch with a couple, but it's strange that not many of them, nobody's hardly in the Chicago area. Nobody is. So it's difficult to still have that face-to-face interaction. But Anuka Brown was one of our, when she left as a senior, she was the all-time scorer and rebounder in the Big Ten. So I did a lot of passing to her, and she said I was a good teammate. So anyway, we're still in touch a lot today. And then Connie Erickson Brown is, she's living in North Carolina, and we were rivals we played against each other our senior year at the state tournament. They won state and we came in 4th. So, and then we ended up being roommates. And so those are probably the 2 main ones. Stacy Neal from Beloit, Wisconsin. She's in Atlanta area. I always hook up with her, and, it's unfortunate that there isn't, and I think that's in general with Northwestern, they tend to get students from all over the country, like where at Loyola it was more concentrated. A lot of people from the Chicago area went to Loyola. So, but I still, we actually, with Zoom and everything else, we did have a couple opportunities to get together via Zoom, and just it's so much easier to kind of connect these days, right, with people from the past. And yeah, so.
Can you talk about your best finish?
My best finish. What do you mean?
Well, your best team finish. Did you guys?
Oh, I'm not great with that. So obviously my high school senior year, we were fourth in state and we had only one loss coming into the tournament. And then so two losses that year. And then at Northwestern, like I said, we had Ohio State who ended up, kind of running the league after Northwestern was the best team, I think, in the late 70s. But by the time I got there, we were I think we finished third or fourth mostly. One year we did, I think, were we co-Big Ten champs or second place? We were, I'd have to check the record book. I don't remember really. We were competitive though. We were one of the better teams at the time, definitely top four.
So you're ready to leave school now, and you spent a year overseas. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, I was in the School of Communicative Disorders. So I was supposed to be a speech pathologist. My mom's an educator, and they have one of the best schools in the country for it there. So I was studying that and handling that. There's not a lot of curriculum that's easy for a student athlete to manage at Northwestern. They have the engineering school, was pretty hardcore at that time. There weren't a lot of places to hide. So I was managing my schoolwork, and I got to my senior year and I did my student teaching, and I was like, this doesn't work at all for me. I don't see myself working with kids in a school. It just wasn't resonating. So my coach helped me connect with some teams and an agent for overseas. And I replaced a girl from Ohio State who was playing in France. So I was able to have that experience for a season. And I got to tell you, it was way tougher than I imagined it would be. I was excited about the opportunity, and it didn't bother me leaving my home nest for the first time, but it was, there's no cell phones yet at that time. And I didn't even have a phone in my apartment where I stayed. I had to go to the post office and literally put coins into and so I would cry. You get so lonely, and what you don't realize is you're playing for there's no teams and schools over there. So you're playing for the town, right? And you have an owner our owner happened to own a porcelain factory in town. And his daughter, I guess, had played and was really good point guard, but she was on maternity leave. And we just didn't have a very good team. And so there's a ton of pressure on you to play really well. And as an inside person, you need that good guard too, right? So I was bringing the ball up a lot, and just, the talent level, I was like, whoa, we even had a 15-year-old and we had a 35-year-old on the team, and they're smoking in the locker room and, just all that stuff. Right. So I was kind of let me get home. But I told myself I did have a brief trip home at Christmas time. And then after the season, I was like, you know what, they wanted maybe one more year. And I was like, 1 year experience was great. And I traveled a lot and hooked up with another girl who was playing in France. And we drove everywhere and went over to Germany, and wherever we could take a day drive, we would go. So it was a wonderful thing to do in a much more carefree time when you could just feel safe going anywhere, So it was, I think, very formative of my life experience, and I had even taken French since third grade at school. So I was like, wow, I'm playing in France and I kind of know how to speak French, Je parle français. So it was good. It was fun.
So you come back and tell us about your first job.
My first job, actually, when I came back, there was a local startup Chicago team. It was called the Chicago Spirit. And we played very short-lived season, 2 months. It was only 5 or 6 teams. And I know Nancy Lieberman and the McGee twins were playing for the Dallas team. And we took a trip there. And then when we came back, the owner of the team's like, we have no more money. So bye-bye. It was done. So I went to get my resume together with the Northwestern. They have a great group of these center court ladies who help. And Dave Rosengard was our athletic director at Northwestern, and he got the job as marketing director for the Bulls. And the guy named Michael started with the Bulls. So this was in early 1985, and it was midway through Michael's rookie season. And I went down there, and they had a need, right? So, and it was kind of a strange time of year, and into January. And so I was able to start right away. There were a couple other jobs I was looking at, but I'm like, it sounds kind of fun to be in basketball, right? To just stay in basketball. So even though, you know how it is as a college player, you don't pay a lot of attention to the pro level. You're mostly I was watching the men's and Big Ten, the women's, all that. So I didn't know how lucky I was to get in at that ground level time with the Bulls. So
who really hired you?
Joe O'Neill, Dave Rosengard, Erwin Mandel. Like, I interviewed with all three of them. And Joe was my main boss in the office, where I worked in kind of tickets and doing backup phone receptionist. So answering any questions for, when there was overflow on the phone. So I kind of learned everything about like the early part of the organization, and I helped with our PR department because we didn't even have computers back then. So she was manually typing game notes. We'd have like 12 pages that we'd have to collate. It was like, you just hop in and do everything. And I was at the game doing play-by-play at the table on the typewriter. And, it's like the only kind of electronic thing we had in the office was the telex machine that gave the Elias stats from the league office. And then boom, within a year, things just started exploding. We got this big old desktop computer, it was crazy. So I saw you just saw the evolution of things happening right before your eyes with the fax machines, etc. So
talk about the first time when you met Jerry Krause.
I was sitting at my desk outside what was a short-lived Rod Thorne's office. So Rod was the GM when I started, and I was sitting, the offices were so small that I had like this desk where everyone passed by, go to the copy machine. And Jerry, when he came in to introduce himself to all the people in the office, he knew of me, and he had followed my brother Jim at Northwestern. So and Mike Tebow, one of the scouts at the time, was like, we got to get Karen to be working for us. He's like, yeah, he goes, do you know how to type? Do you know how to do shorthand? I'm like, yeah, I know all that stuff. My mom made me take business classes. So he's like, all right, well, we're going to be moving offices, and I'll talk to Joe, but I want you working, with me in basketball ops. So that was like one of the first times I met him in person. He already was like scouting me out to be his assistant.
Talk about Jerry a little bit, and talk about some of his personality and what you learned from him.
Oh my gosh, like 24/7, this is before cell phones. So you were either talking to him in person or getting a phone call from him like every 15 minutes. I felt like, it was just, he was a communicator, he information gatherer, and obviously a scout by nature. And he prided himself in that. And this was a time where, hard work paid off in that department, where he would travel anywhere to go see players. And, he would keep it all quiet. And, what I remember about Jerry most is he was very detailed too. And he did have a vision. I don't know if they were already doing it this way, like with kind of the farm system with baseball, with his background too. But he said we have to have a different way of communicating, like where we're going to have a separate basketball operations department. And not many people were doing that, or if anyone. So he kind of started the layout for that, where you worked, along with the coaches, you had all of your scouts reporting to you, and you had almost a separate area of the organization from the business operations side. So we, kind of laid the groundwork for that. And it was cool. He really, if he liked you, he really liked you. He had very strong opinions either way. And, he was someone who just really wanted to do his job well. And if you did your job well, that's really all he cared about too.
Talk about up to coaching, how your role changed with the Bulls.
Well, I just kind of took on more and more responsibility with Jerry. He basically, and that was what was so generous of him too. He would always say, you're like my right arm. If I cut it on, you help me, like you're right in there. And he would be pushing for me every opportunity that came along to get a little more pay or get, like when we built a new practice facility, I was involved with helping them for the planning of that. And then, getting a car, like he negotiated, because I didn't really have a car at the time. You got to get out, so he was very, he knew how much I was willing to do to help him succeed. So he supported me so much. But okay, so I more and more as it grew, they hired so many people through the years there as we started to win and then win the championships. And so and then we were even thinking about getting a WNBA franchise, and he said I would run that if they decided to get it. But as it turned out, it wasn't going to be very profitable, so they took a pass on it. But yeah, he was always trying to have me elevated and do, like, I was right in on all the draft day, just sitting in there with him, making the calls, like understanding that whole process. I got a front row seat to all of that. So that was pretty cool.
Yes, that had to be cool. What was the wildest draft day you ever saw?
And again, I'm not the best with details. Like, it's so funny, but so just seeing how they had a layout of like the way the picks were going to fall. And if they fell in that way, I was obviously to do with Scottie Pippen. I just remember that one very well, where it was like, we're taking Olden Polonies. And then it's like, things kept going the way that, and he just was thrilled to be able to get Scottie. And then I believe Horace was the same draft. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. So then we ended up getting him, and I think there were pressure at that time. I forget who it was to take a different player. And, as it turned out, Jerry knew who the potential all-stars were. And that was just, I just remember lots of celebrating, dancing around, just high fives. Like, it's really cool when they could predict and it ended up turning out just the way they planned.
So when Jerry leaves and John Baxter steps in, did your role change?
Well, it was the timing thing right there. Yeah, I think, with John, he still wanted me around. And, it was at the time I got married and I was having children, and it just was kind of a natural to be a little less available 24/7 like I was with Jerry. But he had hired Matt Lloyd to do a lot of the things that I did for Jerry. And so Matt really became kind of our glue in the department, where he was very innovative, and he had a background in media relations too, where he was able to just information gather, and he was a really good researcher. So I kind of took a step back during those years, even though I was working and I was more running the facility then and doing all the travel than I was like involved in any kind of basketball related part of it, in terms of, actually sitting in on the scouting stuff or having, a little bit of being a sounding board for Jerry for some of the ideas that he had. So
you became the first female coach of the Bulls.
Yeah.
Talk about that.
Yeah. It's funny how, so my daughters were both, I felt like at a good age for me to take on more responsibility again. And as I was doing more and more accounting, and we had a lot of new people with the Bulls who change, the budget and how they want things. And so I felt like I was spending most of my day just doing that type of thing with labeling all the transactions that happen and doing our budget and managing the building. And it was nothing really related to basketball anymore. And I would hear, like, after the end of the season, guys trying to stick on with the Bulls, maybe get like a scouting job or do different things. And I thought, what about me? Like, why I could certainly put my name in the hat and do something like that. And I just talked to John at the time, and Doug was being hired as a consultant too, Doug Collins, and talked to him a little bit. Sam Smith, I spoke with. Sam was a big proponent that helped me realize that I had a voice, and it was a good time for women in the NBA to step forward and have a, just show a little different side to maybe, I think you can see on certain coaching staffs, they can all be the same. So it's like you're adding a little different feel to it. And just knowing the franchise inside and out, like I had, I said something to John, and I couldn't believe how receptive he was. So, and even at that time, he was thinking of stepping more into the forefront. He had been kind of playing a background role, and Gar was leading everything. And then he was thinking of making a shift more into being the face of the decision making. So anyway, it worked out. He said, what do you want to do? Do you want to do more the scouting side or the personnel side or the coaching side? And I said, well, I was traveling a little bit too, and I really liked the interaction with the players and the coaches, and I know the scouting side probably would have been a safer job for me, and you're more just like a lone worker where you're going out and you set your schedule and there's not as much interaction, right? But anyway, I loved it. I loved every minute of it. I was so grateful for an opportunity, and I was able to ease into it, still doing my other role the 1 year and doing it full time as only an assistant coach the last year.
What you learned and what were you surprised about coaching?
What I was surprised about is, the amount of hours. It's just, there's never not something to do. So, and there's no off days, every day of the week, there's something. So even on the off day, if you're the low on the totem pole, you're saying you're going to be available to help, rebound or assist with different things going on. So the amount of work that they put in and the travel, I think, it's hard enough probably as you players, had to do, but just seeing the for each opponent, what goes into that was probably the most eye-opening.
Did you feel when you first became coach, did you feel like you were blazing a trail? How were you received by everybody?
I realized the significance of it, but when you're in the middle of it, you're just doing it. And, it so happened that I think right at that time, there were quite a few hires the following year. So it was becoming more and more of a focal point and story. But I just, at that time, I felt like because of my years with the Bulls and how much I cared about them and how much I knew a lot of already, the coaches all knew me, the players knew me, and, all the staff. I just felt like, it was kind of a natural thing. It wasn't, if I come from the outside and done it, it might be different, but it was not lost on me, the significance of it. But honestly, I thought it's a long time coming. Becky Hammond had been doing it, Jenny Busek, Nancy Lieberman. There were a lot of people who were already in it before me. So, but it was neat for the Bulls to be that first person.
Yeah, I think that they probably saw you as Karen, not as a woman, right? Like they knew you were ready.
Yeah. And, I would talk to John a lot too, and about different players or what I felt was going on once, like we would travel during the playoffs and stuff. So, I've known John forever, and Gar too. It's not like I would ever engage in those kind of conversations unless they wanted me to, but I was always ready to have an opinion there. And I feel like because I've had been around basketball my whole life, they know I'm a basketball person. And, it just takes a while to really learn the language. And I would say that to you, Bill, like that was one of the most surprising things. I was like, I thought I knew basketball. And then you're like, every single movement has a different name that maybe you didn't know. And so you're learning every terminology thing, that you don't really know till you get on the inside with the coaching and how you're trying to be so ultra descriptive with every player as to what they need to do. But anyway, so yeah, no, I felt like I was just someone who made sense at the time to hire and take a chance with, because they really knew who I was.
Yeah, it is funny because the terminology changes all the time, and
Right.
it changes from coach to coach. So you really have to be in line with their thoughts.
Yeah.
So right now you're not coaching. So what's next for you? What would you like to do? Would you like to coach again?
Yeah, well, and it's funny, when we spoke yesterday, I did tell you, like, I got a beautiful opportunity to be an analyst on the Big Ten Network for the women's Big Ten games. So I did 5 of those games, and I really got to know that league, and that was a privilege.
Yeah, awesome.
They're really some talented players. It's just, like I said, I hadn't watched it in a few years, and because I just didn't have the time, and to see how developed that the women's game has become, and just how great they are fundamentally and just talent wise, and what their skill level is. It was really cool to see. And then also I'm working with a local AAU coach, Steve Pratt from Full Package, who's had, a business on the North Shore for many, many years. And he's a wonderful mentor. And it's exactly what I need to do in terms of working with individual players, and like really just from the ground level, teaching them shot technique, and it just everything that I, from being in the front office at the Bulls, I didn't really learn all those little tools and little fundamentals as a coach. And I'm getting that right now. So I think it's just sharpening me and making me more ready for an opportunity.
Talk about your family.
So my girls, my husband's an options trader, and he works. And so things haven't changed a lot during COVID for him. He's mostly just on a computer upstairs, And then, so for my daughters, Casey had, being a class of 2020 high school, I was horrible. Her senior, she worked so hard and was out in California training for water polo, like prior to her senior season. And they were picked to maybe win the state. And they had one practice scrimmage and then boom, cut off. So she was like in a bad place for a few months there, right at the end of school last year, no normal celebration. And then now as a freshman in college at Michigan, she's on water polo and a preferred walk-on. And she's just struggling a little there because she's, not low man on the totem pole. And it is tough. It's everything has been 100% remote, and they have been isolated too several times where they had to quarantine, and they there's no football, there's nothing. So as it's not really, but she doesn't know what she's missing maybe. So that's the silver lining. And then I have a daughter who's a sophomore in high school, and she's doing okay with the remote learning because she just has to roll out of bed and she still has her blanket on and she's logging into her advisory homeroom, and whatever. So it's been kind of easy on them. And not easy, but it's going to be a rude awakening, I think, when we do get back to the normal, like get up and go routine, and she's doing volleyball too. So they're thankful they have a season. It was supposed to be in the fall, but they are doing it now, and they're actually making it happen. But, no parents for any away games or anything, but it's a nice sense of normalcy happening again.
Well, awesome. Karen, we're so thrilled to have you on. I'm really looking forward to getting back to Chicago, and I would love to talk some basketball with you. That would be very awesome.
I'd love to pick your brain, Bill. You talk about the terminology and everything, and it is interesting to share with you maybe what some of our principles were, and then maybe see, if you still agree, or if there's different things that you think hold true, from the time you were playing, and, just it's great to just compare notes, I think.
Yeah, fortunately and unfortunately, I still think about basketball pretty much every day. So everything is blueprinted and clear in my mind. So I'm always curious.
I'm still building my framework, and am open, and every day I learn something new with it. That's what's wonderful about it, right?
Awesome.
Great game.
Well, we'll share some information, but thank you so much. Amazing. And I'm going to look forward to seeing you very soon.
Okay, me too. Thanks so much, guys.